Hey friends, welcome back to Homestead on a Prayer. Today is a really exciting day because it is time to start some seeds. Now, I do already have some little plants growing inside under my grow lights, a few things like onions and celery that need a really early start. But today we're going to be starting, I would say, the first, real major push towards the spring garden. Today I'm going to be starting pretty much all of my cool weather plants that need to be started inside. So that's going to include primarily plants in the brassica family, which would be broccoli, cauliflower, kale, and cabbage. I've got quite a few of all of those to start. We're also going to start some parsley plants as well. So I'm really excited to just dive right into seed starting. So I'm going to go ahead and show you, the little hodgepodge of pots that I have set up here to start the seeds in. So I'm going to be starting my broccoli and cauliflower in this tray here with these pots. I'm not using the entire tray, so I have some left over. Kale and cabbage will be going, and parsley as well, in these little 6-packs. I've got a few of them over here. So as you can see, I'm not really picky about what I start my seeds in. This tray is really nice because it doesn't have the bottom tray with it right now. We'll put that in there when we get inside. But that can basically work as almost like a self-watering tray, which is really useful. These are just cheap 6-packs that I got plants in from a local nursery, and I'm just reusing those. So I've pre-moistened all of this potting mix that I have here. I find that a little bit easier to do, and I think it waters a little more evenly when you have it pre-moistened as opposed to planting the seeds and then watering it. When you water freshly planted seeds, sometimes you can dislodge them. So I just find it easier and more effective to pre-water, so I've done that. I've also, as you've seen, I have pre-filled all of my containers. I also have my labels pre-made because not labeling seeds is a mistake I have made definitely far too many times in the past. When those little seedlings come up, especially seedlings in the brassica family, they look really similar. So, don't count on being able to tell them apart when they come up. It's really best to go ahead and pre-label. Now, I am starting these seeds today in a potting mix. It's a potting mix that I mixed myself as opposed to a seed starting mix. That's really going to come down to personal preference. I did a video maybe a few weeks ago where we mixed up all this potting mix together, and I talked about why I like to make it myself, why I use potting mix as opposed to seed starting mix, and all of the ingredients that I include in it. So I can go ahead and link that below in case that's anything you're interested in. But honestly, it's not going to, as far as starting your seeds, it's not going to make a big difference whether you use potting mix or seed starting mix. The main thing is that if you use seed starting mix, that doesn't generally include any nutrients for your plants. So that means once they sprout and start to get their true leaves, you're going to either want to transplant them into a container that has potting mix, or you're going to need to fertilize them regularly. I would rather just avoid that step, so I go ahead and use potting mix right from the beginning, but as I said, personal preference on that. So we are going to start off with broccoli, and I have 4 varieties of heading broccoli that we will be growing right in this tray right here. So in this first tray, I'm going to be planting, as I said, 4 varieties of heading broccoli and 2 varieties of cauliflower as well. And I think that I'm going to do my broccoli in 2 batches this year. So I have this fairly small amount of pots here, and then I think in another maybe 2 weeks I'm going to start a few more broccoli plants to try to spread out my broccoli harvest a little bit. We'll see what actually happens with that. We'll see if I'm organized enough to do that. We'll see if I have space to do that. But for today, we're just going to start the broccoli seeds that I have here. So I'm just going to start off with 3 of each variety. I don't have an individual tag for each one. So every 3 pots, we'll just change varieties. I'm going to stick these labels in first because then it's a little bit easier for me to stay organized and just to keep track of what I've planted. So I'm going to start off with this broccoli variety. This is Rasmus. This is a new variety to me. I haven't grown this before, but Baker Creek carried it. It's the first time I've seen it from them, and it is an open pollinated variety. Most broccoli varieties that you'll find, there are some exceptions, but for the most part, most of the popular varieties are hybrids. Since I like to save seeds, I always like to give the open pollinated varieties a try, and hopefully eventually one day I'll find one I really like. So I'm going to be planting 3 plants of this. I should say my goal is to get 3 plants. I'm going to put 2 seeds in each pot That way, if we have lower germination, I'll still get some. You can see these broccoli seeds here. They're really tiny. So when it comes to planting seeds, you're going to want to follow the instructions on your seed packet. That will tell you when to start certain seeds. It'll tell you whether they should be started inside, planted directly outside. It'll tell you how deep to plant the seeds, which is very important. It'll also tell you some useful facts, like whether the seeds need darkness or light to germinate. Things like that can make a difference in how well your seed starting journey goes. So you definitely want to read the seed packet and get the information from there. If you were given seeds from somebody who saved seeds from their garden, you saved your own seeds, and you don't have a seed packet, the general rule of thumb, there's a little wiggle room with this, but the general rule of thumb when planting seeds is that you want to plant your seed about twice as deep as the seed is wide. Now, these seeds, for example, I don't know if you can even see that between my fingers. These seeds are really tiny. For broccoli seeds, I think they usually say about a 1/4 inch deep. I'm not going to be super precise when it comes to that. I'm not going to measure, I'm just going to estimate. But you do want to be pretty close when planting seeds, because if you plant it too deep, so what happens is seeds, when they grow from the plant, they have enough energy stored in them to cause germination, to germinate the seed, and then to send a root down and send leaves up to the surface. And that gives them enough energy until they can reach sunlight and reach nutrients in the soil and start making their own energy. But there's a limited amount of energy in the seed. So if your seed has to travel too far to get to the surface, it could run out of stored energy in the seed before it reaches the light and end up dying because it doesn't have the energy to go further. On the other hand, if you plant your seeds too shallowly, for some seeds, I find this is the exception. Some seeds do need darkness to germinate. Those seeds tend to be planted a little bit deeper. Obviously, if they're planted too shallowly and they need darkness to germinate, that lack of darkness can really hurt their germination. But another thing that can happen is, in order to germinate, seeds need to be able to, it's a little bit windy out here, so if you see the camera bouncing, that's why. Hopefully it's not too bad. I'm going to also try not to bump the table too much and bounce it even more. But as I was saying, so seeds need to absorb a certain amount of water to be able to germinate. And if they are planted on the surface of the soil, they're more likely to dry out before they're able to absorb that much water, and that can inhibit germination as well. So while I'm not going to drive myself crazy being too exact with the depth that I plant these seeds, I don't want to be too far off either. So we're going to go ahead, and this seed packet here, you can see right there, it says seed depth a 1/4 inch to 1/2 inch. I usually do about 1/4 inch for really all plants in this family, and I find that works really well. So I'm just going to go ahead and make a couple divots in the soil here, about a 1/4 inch deep or so, and then drop a seed into each one. Now, as I said, I am planting 2 seeds per pot. So I use different techniques when planting seeds from different families. When I plant my peppers and tomatoes, you'll see that I plant them a little bit differently. But I find that brassica seeds, for the most part, in the packets, there are quite a few seeds included, and I'm not really sure the exact reason why I do it this way, but it just works really well for me. So what I do is, for every plant that I'm hoping to get, I will plant 2 seeds in each pot, and then usually both will germinate. I end up thinning out to the strongest plant. When it comes to something like brassica seeds, broccoli, cabbage, kale, cauliflower, those plants also make delicious microgreens. So when you go ahead and thin out your seedlings, you can go ahead and just eat the seedling that you thinned out. I think that might be one reason I plant these plants this way, because, waste really bothers me, especially when I feel like I'm wasting a living plant. And when I'm able to eat the seedling that I've thinned out, then it's not really going to waste. So it doesn't bother me to have extra seedlings that I have to thin out with this type of plant, because, as I said, I can just eat them as a little thinning snack. So I'm just going to go ahead and smooth the soil back over the seeds we planted. And then we're just going to continue on and do the same thing for this whole tray. first batch of broccoli planted, the heading broccoli. I planted 12, or enough seeds to get 12 plants, 3 each of 4 different varieties. Now the main reason that I'm planting 4 different varieties of broccoli, I should say, is mostly because I'm hoping to spread out my harvest season. I did mention that I might do another broccoli planting in a couple weeks to spread it out even a little bit more. But some of these broccoli plants, or these broccoli varieties that I've planted, do have different maturity dates. Because I don't want to be harvesting 12 giant heads of broccoli all at once, I would rather be harvesting maybe 2 heads a week spread out over a longer period. So that's the primary reason why I'm trying different varieties. Also, one of the varieties that I tried, I think I showed you the seed packet, is a Romanesco, which some people actually consider a cauliflower. Depending on the seed company, you'll see it listed with either the broccoli or the cauliflower. That one is a little bit of a different type of variety, and honestly one that I've never been successful with. This is going to be my 3rd year trying it, and I have not been able to harvest a Romanesco head yet. I think it's a little more challenging, at least in my area, than the other broccoli types. So I'm hoping that we will have some success this year. And then additionally, the type I mentioned that is open pollinated, that's the main reason why I'm trying that variety. Now you will also notice, or you may have noticed, when I planted the seeds, I put 2 seeds in each pot, but I didn't plant them right next to each other. I spread them out a little bit. The reason for that is because I'm going to be, as I said, going through and thinning out any pots where 2 seedlings germinate. I'll be keeping the stronger one and thinning out the weaker one. And I want to have them far enough apart that when I pull a seedling out, its roots won't be entangled with the one that I'm going to be keeping and end up damaging that one. So that's just my reason for that. So our heading broccoli is planted. Now I also have 2 varieties of cauliflower. I have this Rover cauliflower and the snowball cauliflower. I tend to have mixed results with cauliflower. Some years we get great cauliflower harvest and some not so much. So hopefully this will be a good year for cauliflower. I'll be planting 2 of these varieties, and I will be planting planting 2 varieties. I'll be planting 4 each of these 2 different varieties for 8 total plants. And I may end up planting a couple cauliflower later in the season as well. One thing to note, a difference between broccoli and cauliflower. Now broccoli, I'm talking about extending my harvest. These broccoli varieties that I'm growing though are a little bit different because when you cut the broccoli head, the main broccoli head, you can keep the plant on the ground and the broccoli will keep producing little mini heads or side shoots for several weeks after the head is cut. Cauliflower does not do that, at least in my experience. If there is a variety out there that does, I would love to hear about that because that would be very exciting. But cauliflower has never done that for me. This is kind of more of a one and done type of crop. And so that's all the more reason to spread out the harvest a little bit more. So I'll be planting these exactly the same way that I planted the broccoli, right in the same tray. And as I said, 4 pots of each variety. So this tray is fully planted with our heading broccoli and our cauliflower. We're going to move on to this tray full of 6-packs now, where we're going to be planting kale, cabbage, and some sprouting broccoli. So I have 4 varieties of kale that we'll be planting today. I'm going to be planting 1 6-pack of each of these. I'm going to plant them the same way I planted the broccoli and cauliflower, with 2 seeds in each cell of the 6-pack. I'm not really sure why. I just get in the habit of doing things a certain way. There isn't a specific reason. A lot of times plants that might need a little bit less space I'll put in a 6-pack, or plants that I want to grow a large amount of, or, you know, just if I want to just stick 1 label in here and know that that label applies to the whole pack, you know. Basically what you should take from this is that you don't need to be that exact when it comes to gardening. You know, there's some things you have to be fairly exact about, but honestly, you'll find some success if you just plant. So that is what we're going to do today. So 4 varieties of kale. So I'll be planting 4 6-packs of kale. I have scarlet kale here, Russian red kale or ragged jack, blue curled Scotch kale. This is more like the kale that you usually see at the grocery store, and dazzling blue kale, which is a lacinato kale. I like to have variety in my kales. These are all beautiful. So the reason for growing so many different varieties, part of it is just, as I said, I just enjoy variety. I think it makes the garden more beautiful. It makes for a little, more interesting experience when you're actually eating this. I also find that certain kales tend to do better with certain weather conditions, and so in some years, other kales will do better than others. So by growing a variety, I'm pretty much guaranteeing myself, or at least giving myself a good chance that at least one of these is going to do really well. So we're going to plant 1 pack of each of these. And again, I'm going to be planting them exactly the same way I planted the broccoli and cauliflower, about a 1/4 inch deep, 2 seeds per 6-pack cell, and kind of spread out for easy thinning. So all of our kale is planted and ready. Now I did want to mention about timing as well. Now I know some of you have asked in the past about the exact dates that I film my videos. Honestly, it depends on my schedule, and like how quickly they get posted depends on my schedule and how much time I have to edit a video. My videos, I try to, for the most part, there are some exceptions. For the most part, I try to post them fairly close to filming, but sometimes they will be delayed by a week or so. Today's date is actually March 4th that I'm starting these, and I think this video will be going live around March 10th. So it'll be close to a week after I've planted this when you guys actually see this video. Now, I do like to, the exact timing of when you start these type of seeds is going to depend on the weather in your area, and most importantly on the estimated last frost date for your area. Now, in my area here in Connecticut, I'm in zone 6, and the estimated last frost date for my area is usually around May 15th. It varies year to year, but it's always sometime in mid-May. And I like to plant these type of plants, brassicas. I find they can handle a little bit of frost, and I find that they handle cool weather a lot better than they handle the heat of summer. So I want to plant these early enough in my garden that I can be harvesting from them before it gets really hot out. So I like to plant these about 4 weeks before my last frost date. So I usually aim to get these plants outside in the ground by mid-April. So usually I say April 15th, but it can vary by, it can be up to a week or so later than that depending on the weather. But April 15th is usually my rough goal that I'm working towards. And I like these to grow inside in my house for 4 to 6 weeks before they get transplanted out. So that's my reason for starting these now. If you live in a cooler area and your spring takes longer to warm up than mine, you will probably want to start these a little bit later. If you live in a warmer area, you would want to start them sooner. I know really warm areas, these types of plants you would grow in the winter and you wouldn't even be starting them right now. So timing is going to depend quite a bit on your area. That's how the timing works out for my area. But even in my area, so I say I aim to get these in the ground by about April 15th or so. But if it ends up being a couple weeks later than that, I would still do it. I think that even if you're seeing this video and your last frost date is coming up a lot sooner than mine and you think, oh no, it's too late, it might not be too late. Go ahead and give it a try and see what happens. Now, if you are in an area that's significantly warmer than mine, you may want to go ahead and go out and buy transplants and get those in your garden right away as opposed to starting seeds. But as I said, it's always worth a try. I mean, I mentioned here that I'm thinking of starting a second batch of broccoli to go out a couple weeks after this broccoli goes out. And I anticipate, unless we have an exceptionally hot summer, I anticipate that broccoli will still do completely fine. So, you can get a little bit of a later start and still be really successful. So that's my little 2 cents about timing. So we have planted the kale. We're now going to move on to cabbage. I'm growing 3 varieties of cabbage, and once again, same family of seeds. I'll be planting them exactly the same way. So these are the 3 cabbages that I'm growing. Red acre cabbage, which I've never grown before. This will be my first year. I'm going to try 2 6-packs of this one just because I think it's so beautiful. That's honestly really my reason. I figure if I'm going to grow cabbage I think is one of the prettier vegetables you can grow in the garden anyway, but especially the red and purple varieties. I also have early Jersey Wakefield. This is more of a cone-shaped cabbage, a little bit on the early side, and Savoy cabbage. So I think I've got a pretty good variety there. The Savoy cabbage has these really pretty crinkly leaves, so I think we're going to enjoy that. I'm just going to go ahead and get these planted, and I'll meet you back here when we're done planting cabbage. So I got all the cabbage planted. I still have parsley left to plant. That's the only one that's actually in a different family, but honestly we're going to plant it really the same way. It just says to plant this a 1/4 inch deep, similarly to the brassicas that we're growing. Parsley does take a little bit longer to germinate, which is why I'm starting this one so early. This is also a fairly cold tolerant plant as well. So I'm going to go ahead and plant a 6-pack of broccoli. I'm going to plant a couple more 6-packs with a few different types of sprouting broccoli. And then I'm just going to get all these plants inside under my grow lights. Now, seeds, when you plant them, usually won't need light to sprout unless the packet specifically says that it requires light to germinate. Most plants don't specifically need light to germinate, but I just get them under the grow lights right away because as soon as they germinate, they're going to need that light right away. Now, I won't usually turn the lights on until I actually see germination, but I'm going to check on them every day, multiple times a day. I mean, let's be honest, I'm probably going to start checking on them maybe an hour from now, even though I know they're going to take days to germinate. But brassica plants, these broccoli, cauliflower, kale that we planted, do tend to, in my experience, germinate really quickly, usually even more quickly than the seed packet will tell you. So I would recommend, if you're not starting them with lights on right away, check on them at least a couple times a day and get them under lights right away. Now, if you have a greenhouse or something like that with an abundance of natural light, you may be able to get away with just using that instead of grow lights. I have found that, in my experience anyway, a sunny window is not enough. My plants have struggled when I've just put them in a sunny window. Now, maybe you live in a different area. Maybe you have a window that gets much more sun than mine do, and maybe that would be successful for you. But I do recommend a grow light unless you have a greenhouse or something like that. One other thing I want to mention is, notice how I have all these 6-packs in this tray here. This tray does not have holes on the bottom. It has no drainage holes. So when I go to water my plants, you'll want them in something like this contained anyway, because when you water your plants, any excess water is going to leak out the drainage holes of the container that you have your seedlings in. And you're going to want something to catch all that water, unless, as I said, you're out somewhere in a greenhouse with an earth floor and it doesn't matter. If it's in your house, you're going to want something to catch the runoff water. And additionally, for pretty much all of my seedlings, prefer to bottom water. I think it's a lot easier. So when I'm bottom watering a tray like this, I'll just remove one of the 6-packs, add a little bit of water to the base of the tray, and then let them soak up the water. You do want to check on them a little while later. I don't have an exact time that I use. I'll just check on them maybe a half hour or so later. And if there's still water remaining in the tray at that point, you do want to go ahead and pour that off, because you don't want to, it is possible to overwater your seedlings. You want to make sure that your soil can maintain those little pockets of air, and you don't want to oversaturate it. So in about half an hour or so, your plants will have had time to soak up the water that they need, and you can go ahead and pour off the extra. Now, the other thing is that you do want to make sure, while your seedlings are germinating, that you do not let the tops of your soil dry out. Once you have seedlings that are a few weeks old, a little more established, the tops of the soil being dry can be okay as long as the bottom of the soil is moist and the roots still have access to moisture. In the beginning, though, that top of the soil is where your seedlings are, and you don't want to let that dry out, because that can slow down your germination. Now, if you are not new to my channel, you know that I'm pretty laid back and low maintenance about pretty much everything related to gardening. And so it probably won't come as a surprise to you that I'm not going to get a little bottle and mist my plants. Many people do that, and that's a great thing to do. It's just another step that I honestly don't really have time for, so I don't really worry about it. I will occasionally top water my plants, my seedlings, while they're still germinating. I know I said bottom watering is best, and that usually is true. While they're still germinating, though, if I feel like the top of the soil is drying out, I will occasionally top water, but you just want to use a really fine water disbursement system or whatever. I just use a little pitcher and just pour very slowly, because you want to make sure that a big stream of water doesn't come and dislodge the seeds before they have a chance to really get established. That being said, I know that I've listed a lot of things and hopefully did not make it sound complicated. It's honestly not that complicated. It's one of those things that you kind of pick up pretty quickly as you go. So if you're new to seed starting, please don't be intimidated by it. Please go ahead and give it a try, because honestly, it's very rewarding to watch your seedlings grow, and it's a lot of fun. And, if you're anything like me, this time of year when it's cold outside, you're kind of itching to get your hands in the soil and just do a little bit of gardening. So it definitely fills that need too. So I hope that you will check back with me. I'll be sure to update you on the growth of these seedlings and just let you know how they do. And I hope that your garden's off to a great start. I hope you're having a great day. I can't wait to see you soon. I'll see you next time.